It was supposed to be a quiet night. A night to unwind after a long week, to relax in the comfort of my own home. I had just settled into my chair, the soft glow of the lamp casting gentle light across the room, when the power flickered. It wasn't unusual, there had been storms in the area, and occasional outages weren't unheard of. But this time, the lights didn't come back on. I sat there, waiting for the familiar hum of electricity to return, but the darkness grew heavier around me. I reached for the lamp, tapping it, as if that would somehow make it work again. But nothing happened. The silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just a minor inconvenience. I could wait for the lights to come back. The batteries in my flashlight were probably dead anyway, so it wasn't like I could do much. I sat there in the growing void, listening to the house settle, the distant thrum of the refrigerator that, too, had gone silent. But then, nothing. No comforting sounds. Only the vast, consuming blackness. Then came the rustling. At first, I told myself it was just the house. The wood creaking, the air shifting, perhaps an animal outside. But that wasn't it. It was something else. Something that shouldn't have been there. And in the deep, unnatural quiet, I began to realize I wasn't alone. I blinked, my pulse quickening, my chest tightening. Something moved in the dark. I wasn't imagining it. My ears strained, and I thought I heard it again, soft, deliberate, like something dragging itself across the floor. My breath caught. The house was old, yes, and it made noises, but this? This was different. This was purposeful. I stood up, my legs shaky, a cold sweat forming on my brow. My hands stretched out in front of me, fingers grazing the walls as I tried to orient myself. Where had the couch gone? The familiar contours of my home had dissolved into nothingness, replaced by an all-consuming blackness. I stumbled forward, feeling the contours of the furniture, trying to ground myself in something I could still recognize. My mind raced as I listened to the shifting, that almost imperceptible dragging sound. It was coming from all directions now, surrounding me. My own breath felt too loud, too desperate in the oppressive silence. I was trembling. I could feel it, something was watching me. I swallowed, my throat dry. Hello. The word felt pathetic, weak, but I said it anyway, hoping for a response, for some reassurance that this was just a glitch, that I wasn't about to lose my mind. No answer. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I strained to listen. The rustling grew louder. But this time, there was something else, another sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the other side of the room. I forced myself to move, to take one step, then another. But the floor felt uneven beneath me, and I had to stop myself from falling. I froze. I wasn't imagining the sound anymore. The tapping was more pronounced now, more deliberate, like fingers tapping against wood, soft but undeniable. My heart raced even faster, my hands slick with sweat. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I had to. I blinked. For the briefest of moments, I thought I saw something, a flicker of light, maybe. But when I opened my eyes again, it was gone. Still, I knew. I knew that something was there. I had felt it. The air shifted. Cold. A sudden chill that crept into my bones, leaving me with an uncanny feeling of being watched, of being surrounded. I closed my eyes tightly, desperate to block out the suffocating blackness, but the darkness only seemed to press in on me harder. I blinked again. That was when I saw them. At first, it was nothing more than a faint gleam, barely noticeable in the corner of my vision. A pair of glowing red eyes, floating in the void. I stiffened, not sure if I had truly seen them or if it was just my imagination running wild. I blinked again. There were more. Another pair. And another. Each one just as faint, just as unsettling, as the first. And as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the gleaming eyes grew brighter, more distinct. I felt my breath catch in my throat. They were watching me. Dozens of them, swirling in the shadows, shifting closer with each blink. Panic flooded my chest as the realization hit me, they weren't just in front of me. They were all around me. Circling me. Moving closer. I was trapped. I could feel them getting nearer, hear them in the air, something skittering across the floor, as if they were crawling toward me. I blinked again. The eyes were right there, inches from my face. I could feel them burning into me, that piercing, malicious gaze. My body froze in place, paralyzed by the sheer terror of it all. I tried to scream, but my throat was tight. My hands shook uncontrollably, my nails scraping against the floor in desperate, futile attempts to push myself away from whatever was closing in on me. I blinked again. The eyes were everywhere now, surrounding me, filling the room. They seemed to be watching me with a cold, unblinking hunger. They were no longer just in my vision, I could feel them, too. The air seemed heavier, denser, as if the room had somehow shifted, as if the very space around me had come alive with those malicious, glowing eyes. I reached out, groping for something, anything, that might give me some semblance of protection. But there was nothing. No light. No escape. Only the suffocating presence of those eyes. I blinked once more, unable to stop myself. They were inches from my face now, too close to ignore, too close to escape. I could feel the heat radiating off them. My skin prickled, my pulse pounding in my ears as a low, rasping sound filled the air, like something breathing heavily, something waiting. Waiting for me. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my eyes shut, squeezing them tight, my heart pounding, my mind whirling in chaos. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. I was alone in the dark with them. The eyes were still there. Always watching. And when I finally dared to open my eyes, they were gone. But I knew they hadn't left. They were still there, waiting. Watching. And they would never let me go. I stood in the silence, trembling, my body still frozen in place. The absence of sound was deafening. I opened my eyes cautiously, praying for some sign of relief, some hint that the nightmare had ended. But there was nothing. No eyes. No movement. No sound. Only the heavy weight of the darkness that clung to me like a thick fog. I felt dizzy, disoriented, as if the very act of blinking had torn me between two realities, one where the world was normal, and the other, where something unnatural waited just beyond the edge of sight. I took a shaky step forward, the floor creaking beneath my weight. The house felt even more oppressive now, as though the walls had closed in. I reached out, my hand brushing against the wall, trying to find something solid in the vast, consuming void. My mind screamed for me to run, but there was no escape from this. I blinked again. I couldn't help it. It was as though something inside me needed to. And when I opened my eyes, I felt it, like a spark of dread lighting deep in my chest. Something was there, but I couldn't see it. Not yet. But I could feel the shift, like a breath held in the air, just waiting to be exhaled. I didn't dare blink again. I held my eyes wide open, forcing myself to see, to stay aware of every inch of the dark space around me. But I could still feel them. I knew they were out there, just beyond the reach of my vision. Their eyes burned into my mind, searing their presence deep within me. And that was the worst part, the knowledge that, no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, they would always be there, hidden in the dark, watching, waiting for me to blink again. So I stayed still. I never blinked again. But the eyes were still there. Always watching. Always waiting. And they would never leave. Not until I did. It's been a while since that night, but every time I close my eyes, I can still feel it, the suffocating air, the subtle, rhythmic sound that filled the room, the growing dread that twisted in my chest. I used to think it was just a bad dream, a trick of the mind, something my brain concocted after a late-night horror movie. But that was before I heard the breathing. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the creaks and groans of an old house settling, or the wind pressing against the walls. But it wasn't. I know it wasn't. I was alone. Or so I thought. The night began like any other. The usual silence of my small, cluttered bedroom, the faint hum of the refrigerator from down the hall, the soft glow of the nightlight. I had just settled into bed, my body heavy with exhaustion, ready to let the darkness take me. But then I heard it. The breathing. It started as a faint sound, barely audible, a steady inhale and exhale, almost like someone was lying beside me, breathing softly in the darkness. I froze. My mind raced, thinking of all the possibilities, but none of them made sense. I was alone, wasn't I? I had checked the locks, made sure all the windows were closed. And yet, the breathing persisted. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house. It wasn't even the quiet hum of the world outside. It was something else. Something that was there with me. My heart pounded in my chest, a sudden rush of adrenaline shooting through my veins. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body tense, my breath shallow. I strained my ears, trying to listen more closely, trying to understand what I was hearing. It wasn't loud, just a soft, steady rhythm, almost as if it were trying to be discreet, but I could feel it, feel its presence. It wasn't my own breath. I knew that much. My breath was shallow with panic, but this sound was deeper, more deliberate. I didn't know what to do. My mind kept spinning in circles, trying to rationalize what I was hearing. It could be the house, I told myself. Old houses make noises. But this was different. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the wind. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the cold hardwood of the floor sending a shiver through my body. Slowly, I stood, my eyes scanning the room, but everything was still. The darkness seemed to press in around me, the shadows of the furniture looming larger than they should have been. The sound of breathing was still there, faint but persistent. I moved toward the source of the sound, toward the wall behind the bed. My feet shuffled across the floor, my pulse racing with every step. I felt like an intruder in my own room, as if something was watching me, waiting for me to make a move. When I reached the wall, I stood there for a moment, just listening. The breath was so close now, so tangible, I could almost feel it in the air around me. It was warm, too warm for the temperature of the room, and it was steady. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. I reached out, my hand trembling, and pressed my palm to the cold, textured surface of the wall. For a moment, nothing happened. I felt the rough texture under my fingers, felt the coolness of the drywall, but the breathing continued. The soft, steady rhythm that was coming from within the wall. And then, something changed. It was subtle at first, a slight shift in the air, as though the wall itself was alive, breathing with me. The pressure in the room seemed to thicken, as if it were drawing me in, pushing me closer to the source of the sound. My hand was still on the wall, my pulse now pounding in my ears. And then, it happened. The wall exhaled. A deep, suffocating rush of air, as if something massive, something alive, was pressed up against it, just behind the drywall. It felt as though the air itself was being sucked from my lungs, replaced with the heavy, warm breath of whatever lay behind. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. I felt my knees tremble, my body betraying me as fear set in like ice running through my veins. I turned quickly, searching the room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But there was nothing. No one. No explanation. Just the quiet, oppressive darkness. I took a few shaky steps back toward the bed, my mind trying to make some kind of rational sense of what I had just experienced. But I couldn't. Nothing made sense. I reached for the light switch, my hand trembling. When the light flickered to life, the room was bathed in a sterile, harsh glow, and for a moment, I thought maybe everything would be all right. The breathing had stopped. The suffocating pressure had lifted. But as I looked toward the wall once more, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The wall, once solid and still, was now shifting. Not in the sense that it was moving, but in the way the air around it felt warped, almost alive. I couldn't tell if it was a trick of the light or if it was actually happening, but I knew one thing for certain: it wasn't normal. The sound of breathing came again, louder this time, more pronounced. It was closer now. I backed away from the wall, my eyes never leaving it, as if staring at it too long might make it real. My heart was in my throat now, and I could feel a cold sweat beginning to form on the back of my neck. In a desperate, panicked motion, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my fingers fumbling as I tried to dial 911, but the numbers blurred in my vision. My breath was coming too quickly, too erratically, and I couldn't seem to focus. The breathing kept growing louder, more frantic, almost as if it knew I was trying to escape. Then, in a sudden burst of action, I turned and bolted for the door. I ripped it open and ran down the hallway, my feet pounding against the floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. But even as I ran, the breathing followed. It was in the walls, in the floors, in the very air. It was everywhere. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next night, or the one after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me to return, something hidden just behind the walls of that room, breathing in the darkness. Months have passed since that night, but the memories still haunt me. Every creak in the house, every whisper of wind, every shift in the air, my mind races back to that wall, to the thing that was waiting, breathing. And now, even when I'm far away from that house, I can still hear it, the faint, steady exhale of whatever it was, lurking just behind the walls, waiting for the next time I get too close. I wish I could say that after all this time, I found some sense of peace, that the fear faded with the passing days. But I can't. The truth is, the walls haven't stopped breathing. They haven't stopped waiting. I moved out of that house, thinking distance would grant me relief, but that's a lie I told myself to feel safe. Every night since, as I lie in bed, I hear it, just faintly, a subtle exhale, a breath that doesn't belong. The walls of my new apartment, the ones that I thought were different, now hum with that same rhythmic sound. At first, I convinced myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, reliving the terror in my sleep. But the breath is too real, too steady to ignore. It's always there, like an old companion I can't shake. Sometimes, when I wake in the dead of night, I find myself listening closely, just to be sure it's there. And it always is. I've tried everything, talking to experts, getting the house checked for structural issues, even moving to different parts of town. But the sound follows. I can't escape it. I can't escape them. I don't know if I'll ever find out what it is behind those walls, or what it wants from me. But every day, I hear that same soft, steady breath. It lingers just out of reach, filling the air around me with its presence. I'm never truly alone. And now, when I close my eyes, I can't help but wonder, what if I'm not the one trapped? What if it's waiting for me to come back to the place where it all began? Maybe it's just a matter of time before I'm drawn back, pulled toward those walls once again. Because the walls, they never forget. The phone never rings this late. Not for me. Not at 2:42 a.m. But tonight, as I lay in the quiet of my room, trying to drift back to sleep after a restless day, the shrill sound cuts through the stillness. My heart jolts in my chest as I blink open my eyes, disoriented by the interruption. I glance at the phone resting beside me on the nightstand. The screen lights up with a name that shouldn't be there, mine. My name flashes across the caller ID, its harsh glow illuminating the dark room. For a brief, panicked moment, I think it must be a mistake. Some sort of glitch. But as the seconds tick by, I know something isn't right. Why would my own name appear on the screen in the dead of night? My thoughts scramble for logic as I slowly reach for the phone. My fingers are numb with cold, but I manage to swipe to answer. I bring the phone to my ear, trying to ignore the gnawing sense of dread settling in my stomach. Hello. I croak, my voice thick with sleep. A soft, broken sob echoes from the other end, cutting through the darkness with a raw, aching sound. I freeze. My breath catches. And then, as if in some cruel nightmare, the voice on the other end whispers, shaking with grief. Why did you leave me here? My skin prickles. The sobs are slow, ragged, pulling at the deepest part of me. The sound is so familiar, yet it is twisted, fractured. It's me. My voice. My own voice, but I can't recognize the pain in it. It's the voice of someone lost, someone abandoned. My pulse quickens, panic creeping in. I didn't leave anyone, I stammer, my throat tightening as the words escape. Who is this? The sobs continue, louder now, so raw they seem to rattle the walls. But no words come. Just the overwhelming, desperate weeping that echoes in my mind, twisting and warping. My heartbeat is so loud in my ears I can hardly think straight. The voice finally breaks through again, the question repeating, each word like a slap to my chest. Why did you leave me here? I squeeze my eyes shut, trying to push back the wave of dread threatening to swallow me whole. I don't understand. How could this be? How could it be me, my voice, sobbing, pleading from the other side of the phone. Who are you? I try again, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? For a moment, there's only silence. The kind that suffocates you, that fills your ears with a ringing hum, leaving you empty. Then the voice comes back, softer, like a faint echo in the vast distance. You left me here, but I'm still here. Waiting. I feel my breath catch in my throat, my mind struggling to make sense of the words, but there's no explanation, no reason. Just the weight of it all, pressing down, suffocating me. I can't breathe. I hang up before the voice can speak again, my fingers trembling as I tap the screen. The phone goes dark, but the silence of the room feels like it's been shattered. I try to calm myself, to rationalize. It's just a prank. It's just some sick joke. But deep down, I know it isn't. I know something is wrong. I glance at the clock, 2:46 a.m. 5 minutes. It's been 5 minutes since the call. But why does it feel like hours have passed? The hair on the back of my neck prickles. I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong, something is watching me star. The room seems to grow colder, the air denser. I pull the blanket tighter around me, feeling an inexplicable chill seeping into my bones. I try to tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks on me. But the unease won't go away. Another sound slices through the stillness of the night, creak star. My heart skips a beat. I freeze, staring at the doorway to the hallway. The sound comes again, louder this time, like a footstep on the floorboards. My breath quickens as the terror that I had hoped to bury rises in me, clawing at my chest. It's nothing. It's just the house settling. Get a grip, But then there's another creak, closer. Too close. I slide out of bed, my legs shaky beneath me. My hands are clammy as I reach for the phone again, but I can't bring myself to look at it. Instead, I tiptoe toward the door, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. The darkness in the hallway feels thick, like it's waiting, watching. I press my ear to the door, straining to hear. Silence. The only sound is my own breath, heavy and unsteady. I slowly turn the doorknob, my heartbeat so loud in my chest I can hear it in my ears. The door swings open with a faint groan. My eyes dart across the hallway. The shadows loom, stretching far beyond what my eyes can see. Nothing is there. I release the breath I didn't realize I was holding, though the unease doesn't dissipate. I step into the hallway, every instinct telling me to turn back. But I move forward, each step feeling like I'm walking further into the unknown. Nothing is wrong. I'm just being paranoid. Just being, Another creak. Closer. My breath catches in my throat. This time, it's unmistakable. Someone is here. I whirl around, expecting to see a figure, a shadow. But the hallway is empty. A soft sob. So faint, it's barely a whisper. But it's there. And it's coming from the far end of the hallway. I freeze, my feet rooted to the floor, as the sobs grow louder, filling the space around me. The voice. The same one from the phone call. My voice. I swallow, my throat dry as I take a hesitant step forward. The sound is unmistakable, heartbreaking, and raw. It doesn't make sense. How can it be? My mind is screaming at me to run, to get out, to do anything but stand there. But I can't. The sobs are so close now, and yet, there's still nothing visible. But I know it's there. I know it's coming for me. A figure shifts out of the darkness. It's hunched, twisted, like it's dragging itself toward me with every breath. My breath hitches as I recognize it. It's me. It's me, my own body, contorted and broken, dragging itself along the floor like it's been left to rot. My face is so distorted, eyes wide and unblinking, mouth open in a silent scream. The sobs are louder now. They fill the hallway, reverberating off the walls. And with each desperate sob, I realize, it's not just the voice of me. It's the part of me that's been lost, abandoned. The part of me that's been left in the dark. Why did you leave me here? The voice trembles, choking on the words. It's my voice, but it's raw. It's broken. It's a question I don't have an answer for. My legs won't move. I'm rooted to the spot, my body trembling. The figure gets closer, and with every movement, I can feel the weight of its grief pressing in on me. The darkness around us thickens, suffocating me, and I know I can't escape it. You left me here, the voice whispers, and I feel a cold hand close around my throat. And I realize, with horror, that it's not just the voice I'm hearing. It's the sound of myself. And I've never left. Not truly. The air grows even colder, the darkness in the hallway wrapping around me like a suffocating cloak. I try to scream, to run, but my legs feel like they've turned to stone. My feet won't move, frozen in place, as the twisted figure, myself, comes closer, each drag of its broken body sounding like nails scraping across a chalkboard. My reflection, warped and distorted, stretches toward me, its eyes wide with something too deep to understand. I want to scream, to beg for mercy, but no words come out. The sobs continue, relentless, each one an accusation. Each one reminding me of something I can't quite remember. Something lost. Why did you leave me here? The voice is louder now, impossibly loud, vibrating through my bones, shaking the very foundation of the house. I feel the grief like a weight crushing me, pressing down on my chest until I can't breathe. I try to pull away, to break free from the suffocating pull of the figure that is somehow both me and not me. But it's too late. I'm no longer sure where I end and it begins. The line between us blurs, the darkness closing in. The last thing I hear is my own voice, whispering, "You can't escape me." The words burn through my mind as the cold hands of my own grief wrap around my throat, squeezing tighter. And then, there is only darkness. The sobs fade into nothing. And I am lost in the silence. It was one of those nights, quiet, the kind where time seems to slow and stretch out like an elastic band. I sank into the couch, remote in hand, flipping between channels, the glow of the TV the only light in the room. I had long since lost track of what I was watching. My eyelids felt heavy, but I didn't want to sleep. Something about the silence kept me awake, and I let my thoughts wander aimlessly, the distant hum of the television almost soothing. Then, without warning, the picture on the screen flickered. I frowned, gripping the remote. The image shifted, lines of static rolling across the screen like the static of a dying signal. I reached for the power button, but before I could press it, something strange happened. A figure appeared, blurry at first, hidden beneath the shifting white noise. I blinked, leaning closer. The figure moved through the static, the shapes growing clearer, sharper. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just any figure. No, this was me. I leaned in, my heart beginning to race. The face on the screen, though distorted by the static, was unmistakably mine. My own eyes, my own nose, my own lips. It was me, but it wasn't. It was like a warped reflection, something dark and twisted. My pulse quickened, and a cold sweat crept down the back of my neck. The figure moved, its mouth opening. My voice, my own voice, came through the TV speakers, though it sounded strange, shaky, as if coming from a distance, distant and wrong. "Don't turn around," it said. The words were slow, deliberate, each one wrapping itself around my mind. The voice, it was mine, yet it wasn't. It sent chills crawling up my spine, raising the hair on my arms. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. My mind screamed at me to turn off the TV, to get up, to run, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place. The voice on the screen spoke again, quieter this time, more insistent. "Don't turn around." It wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was a command, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. My hands trembled as they clutched the remote, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. The static hummed louder, drowning out everything else, but the figure on the screen, it didn't disappear. It only grew clearer. My throat went dry. Why? I managed to whisper, though the words came out weak, a mere breath. Because it's already behind you. The air in the room seemed to freeze, a suffocating silence taking over. My blood ran cold, and every inch of my body screamed to turn, to look, to check, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. The figure on the screen smiled, an eerie, unnatural grin spreading across its face. Its eyes, my eyes, burned through the static, staring into mine, seeing through me. It was like it could sense every thought, every fear. I felt a presence. It wasn't imagined. It was real. I could feel it, standing just behind me, breathing. I dared not even blink. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, a deafening thrum in my ears. Don't look, the figure urged again. It will see you. A pressure built up in the room, a heaviness that seemed to press against my chest, making it harder and harder to breathe. The figure's face twisted in a grotesque grin, its eyes widening, as if it was savoring my fear. I couldn't help it, I had to look. I turned, slowly, my body shaking, every muscle screaming at me to stop. But I couldn't. The figure's warning echoed in my mind as I turned my head, eyes wide with terror, praying, hoping that there was nothing behind me. But there was. A shape loomed in the dark, a shadow too large, too twisted to be human. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen, a distortion of limbs, long and jagged, stretched unnaturally as if it didn't belong in the room. The air turned frigid, the kind of cold that sank deep into your bones. The thing, it was smiling, its mouth opening wide in a grotesque, silent scream. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. It had heard me. The TV flickered once more, the static returning with a deafening roar as the figure on the screen, still smiling, whispered one final thing before everything went black. Now, it has you. And then, nothing. The darkness swallowed the room, the silence deeper than I had ever felt. It was complete and all-encompassing, like I had been pulled into another world entirely, one where sound didn't exist, where nothing moved. My body was still, paralyzed, but my mind screamed in a way I couldn't even begin to explain. I tried to blink, to breathe, but it was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. There was nothing. Just an endless void. But then, the silence was shattered. A sound, soft at first, like a tap against glass. Then another. And another. The tapping grew louder, each sound a rhythmic beat that echoed in my mind. I tried to close my eyes, to block it out, but I couldn't. I could hear my own breath, sharp and ragged, my heartbeat now pounding in my ears as if it was coming from somewhere else. The tapping was relentless. It was coming from the TV. No, it was coming from within the TV. I stared at the screen, eyes wide, unable to tear my gaze away. The static had returned, flickering violently as if something was trying to break through, something too big to fit. Then, suddenly, the screen went black again, leaving me in a suffocating void. But that tapping, the tapping was still there, even louder now. It was inside my head. I felt the air change, a shift, as if something had moved in the room. My spine tingled, a cold dread sweeping over me. The static started again, this time, it wasn't just on the TV. It was in the room, in my mind, swirling around me, pressing against my skin. The voice returned, but it wasn't just through the TV speakers anymore. It was everywhere. Asterisk, don't turn around, asterisk. But it was too late. I felt the cold, long fingers brush against my neck, a shiver of ice that sank into my bones. The thing that had been behind me was no longer there. It was inside me now. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Asterisk, now you're mine, asterisk, the voice whispered, my own voice, low and mocking. The shadow that had been waiting behind me, the thing that had wanted me to turn around, was no longer a figure in the darkness. It was me. And now, I could feel it, a presence, an echo of myself, twisting, consuming everything that was mine. I had become it. And just as the figure had warned, I knew the truth now. There was no escape. It wasn't a warning. It was a fate. I wasn't watching the TV anymore. The TV was watching me. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, as if the entire world had been plunged into a void. My limbs were frozen, numb, my body no longer obeying me. I could feel the presence around me, a shadow that was no longer just behind me, it was within me, taking root in the deepest parts of my mind. It was me. I wanted to scream, to fight, to claw my way back into the light, but it was no use. My thoughts were no longer my own. I had become a vessel for something else, something ancient and twisted. The static buzzed louder, a maddening hum that filled the room, echoing in the pit of my stomach, vibrating through my bones. The figure on the screen was gone, replaced by a flickering image of me. It was no longer distorted by the static, it was perfect, clear, and alive in a way that felt unnatural. Its eyes locked onto mine, and I saw something in them, something cold, something triumphant. It smiled. You didn't listen, it whispered, its voice sending a cold shiver down my spine. Now, you'll never be free. The image on the screen seemed to pulse, growing larger, and I felt myself drawn to it, not out of curiosity, but out of something darker. It was like a magnetic pull, an invisible force that tugged at my soul. I was no longer aware of my body, of the room around me. I was only aware of the screen, of the image staring back at me. My own face, twisted into a grin. A final realization hit me, this was no longer just a warning. It was a transformation. And as the image on the screen shifted once again, something inside me broke. The shadow in the corner of the room, the one that had once loomed behind me, was no longer a distant threat. It had taken me. I was now part of it, a reflection that could never be escaped. With a shudder, my eyes widened in horror as I realized the truth. The figure on the screen wasn't just a warning. It wasn't just another version of me. It was the future, the one that would come after. And the last thing I saw before everything went black was the static, swirling, as my face, my true face, grinned back at me, waiting to take its place in the screen. Now, I would be the one watching. And somewhere, someone else would be staring at the screen, just as I had. It was one of those nights when the world outside felt distant, muffled by the walls of my quiet home. The air was thick with the kind of stillness that only comes after a long day of work, when your body and mind finally surrender to exhaustion, but your thoughts still linger, restless. I had just settled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a book open in my lap, when I noticed it. At first, it was nothing more than a trick of the light, something my mind created to fill the empty spaces of the night. But as I glanced toward the window, I saw it again. A figure. A shadow. A person. Standing outside, unmoving, just beyond the reach of the street lamp. The figure was so clear, so still, that I could almost make out the shape of their features, though there was no face, no detail, just the outline of a person. It was as though they were waiting. Waiting for what? Or for whom? I couldn't look away. My fingers tightened around the book in my lap, a sense of dread creeping into the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't right. I wasn't alone. But when I dared to move, to look closer, what I saw next would haunt me forever. I stood slowly, trying to steady my breath. My legs felt like lead as I walked toward the window, as if the air itself had thickened. The sound of my heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the usual hum of the night. The closer I got to the window, the clearer the shadow became. It wasn't a trick of the moonlight. It wasn't a tree or a passing car casting a fleeting form across the glass. This was different. This was deliberate. My mind screamed at me to pull the blinds shut and lock the door, but my feet wouldn't obey. It was as though something, some force, held me rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the shadow. The air grew colder, the temperature in the room dropping several degrees in a matter of moments. I reached for the blinds, my fingers trembling as I grasped the cord. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to see. Or maybe I was afraid to see anything at all. But I couldn't stop myself from pulling them aside. As I peered through the glass, I expected to find nothing. Perhaps the shadow would disappear, swallowed up by the night. But instead, it was gone. Just like that. The relief that washed over me was fleeting. My eyes scanned the darkness outside, searching for any sign of movement, but there was nothing. Not a single sound. No footsteps on the gravel driveway, no rustling in the bushes. The street lamp flickered, casting a weak yellow light across the yard. Everything was eerily still. I exhaled, a shaky breath escaping my lips. It had been nothing. I was just imagining things, I told myself. My eyes were playing tricks. I was too tired. Still, the sensation of being watched lingered, crawling along my skin like 1,000 tiny needles. I closed the blinds quickly, the slats clicking into place with a sharp, almost unnatural sound. But the moment I turned away from the window, it happened. A flicker. I froze, my body locking up as I looked around the room. The overhead light flickered briefly, casting the room into shadow, then returned to its usual dim glow. But as my eyes adjusted to the light, I realized something. The shadow from outside, it was still here. But now, it was inside. I blinked, certain I had to be imagining it. But no. In the far corner of the living room, just past the hallway door, there it was. A dark shape. A figure. Its form was indistinct, shifting like a smudge on the wall, but I could feel its presence as though it were reaching toward me. My breath caught in my throat. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I tried to rationalize it. The shadows in the corners of the room, the flickering light, it was just the power, I told myself. The house was old, the wiring faulty. Maybe the lights were malfunctioning, and that's why it seemed like the shadows were moving. But deep down, I knew better. The figure in the corner wasn't just a shadow, it was waiting. I backed up slowly, my hand reaching for the light switch, but when I flicked it, the room plunged into darkness. My heart raced. I fumbled for the switch again, but it wouldn't come back on. The faint glow from the street lamp outside filtered through the blinds, casting weak beams of light across the floor. That's when I saw it move. The shadow didn't remain still anymore. It shifted, stretching along the walls in a jerky, disjointed motion, as though it were trying to get closer to me. It flickered, once, twice, and then, there it was, right in front of me. I staggered back, but the darkness seemed to close in on me, swallowing the space around me. I could see the shape now, clearer than before, tall, impossibly tall, with long arms that stretched far beyond the normal proportions of a human. Its outline was distorted, as though it was made of shadows themselves, flickering with the erratic rhythm of a broken light bulb. The air in the room grew heavier, suffocating. My head swam, my vision blurred as if the flickering itself was pulling at my consciousness. It wasn't just in the corners now. The shadow was everywhere, all around me, stretching and shrinking, as if it were alive. I took a step backward, and my foot hit something. I stumbled, falling against the wall, but the movement only seemed to provoke it. The shadow lunged, flickering faster now, and I could feel its presence reaching for me, like it was crawling into my skin. Its hands, those long, twisted fingers, reached out, brushing against my arm. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. My legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place, unable to move, unable to escape. The shadow was everywhere. In the walls, in the floor, in the very air I breathed. I could feel its cold touch crawling over me, wrapping around me, seeping into my mind. My heart pounded in my chest as I fought to break free from its grasp. My eyes darted around the room, desperate for any way out, but the flickering shadow blocked every escape, every avenue of light. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the flickering stopped. The air was still again. I dared to look around, afraid of what I might see, but the room was empty. The light flickered back on, steady this time, illuminating the walls, the furniture, the floor. Everything was exactly as it had been. But I knew. The shadow was still there, somewhere. Watching. Waiting. And it wouldn't stop until it had me. I stood there, breathless, my body trembling from the chill that still lingered in the air, as if the darkness had left its cold mark on me. The room seemed impossibly still now, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. I told myself it was over. It had to be over. The shadow, whatever it was gone. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel it, lurking just beneath the surface. That sense of being watched, of being followed, never truly left. I glanced around the room, half expecting the shadow to flicker back to life at any moment, but everything appeared unchanged. I wanted to run. To leave this place behind. But my feet wouldn't move. The door felt like miles away, like it was trapped behind an invisible wall. I couldn't escape. I couldn't even scream anymore. My voice had gone silent in the wake of the horror I had witnessed. I stepped forward, cautiously, as if the very air might betray me. The dim light from the lamp above cast long shadows on the walls, but none of them moved. None of them flickered. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, in the reflection of the dark window, I caught a glimpse of something. A figure. The shadow, just as it had been before. Its outline was faint, almost indistinguishable, but I knew it was there. It was watching me through the glass. I turned quickly, but nothing was there. Just the empty room, the safe, familiar walls I had always known. The shadow was gone, or so I thought. But the flickering, that incessant, maddening flickering, had returned. I closed my eyes, willing it to stop, to disappear. The light above me buzzed, flickered once more, and in the corner of my vision, the shape shifted again, growing larger, stretching toward me, its presence unmistakable. It was never gone. And I knew, in that moment, that I never would be, either. The darkness had found its way in, and it wouldn't let go. Knock, knock. It's always been quiet here, too quiet sometimes. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder if the house is listening, if it's watching. I moved in a few months ago, hoping for peace. A fresh start, away from the noise, the distractions. The world outside had been loud enough. I thought this place would be a sanctuary, a place to recharge. But the silence? It was suffocating. I had gotten used to it over time, to the creaks of the house settling and the distant hum of the fridge. That was before the knocking started. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Old houses make strange noises, don't they? But then it became something more. Something deliberate. Something that felt wrong. It's been happening for weeks now, at odd hours of the night. I never used to worry, not until tonight. Tonight, it felt different. Tonight, the knock didn't stop. And now, it's here. The knocking is inside the house. I awoke with a start, my eyes snapping open to the stillness of my bedroom. My phone's screen glowed faintly in the dark, and I groggily glanced at the time, 3:17 a.m. It was the dead of night, the kind of hour where everything in the world felt frozen. Everything, except for that sound. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. It echoed through the walls, sharp and insistent. The first knock jolted me upright, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes darted around the room, searching for the source. Nothing. I thought I must have been dreaming, but then it came again. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. Louder this time. Closer. My heart began to race as the sound reverberated through the house, like a drumbeat in the middle of the night. I fumbled for my phone, reaching for it with trembling hands. The front door camera feed was the first thing I checked. The app opened, and I stared at the screen, waiting. The front porch was empty. Nothing was there. No cars. No figures standing in the darkness. Just the empty, rain-slicked concrete beneath the weak glow of the porch light. Relief washed over me at first. It had to be nothing. A branch brushing the door, maybe the wind playing tricks with my mind. I let out a shaky breath, then turned to put my phone back on the bed. But before I could, the knock came again. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. And this time, it wasn't just at the door. It was deeper, closer, inside the house. The sound moved through the walls, echoing down the hallway, following me. I froze. My blood ran cold. The house had been silent for months, but now. It felt as though something was creeping through the house, its presence slipping in between the very walls. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it, felt the air grow colder, heavier. My mind screamed at me to call someone, anyone, but I couldn't move. My phone lay still on the bed, its screen flickering in the dim light, and I wondered if anyone would even hear me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The knocking continued. Steady. Measured. It was like a countdown, a warning. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. My heart thundered in my chest. I grabbed the phone and opened the front door camera feed again, but this time, I didn't see the empty porch. Instead, I saw something else. A reflection. Just beyond the door, outside the window, a figure stood. I couldn't make out its features at first, just the vague outline of a person. They were tall, far too tall, and their shadow stretched unnaturally long on the porch. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just a trick of the light or my mind playing games. There was someone, something, there. I dropped the phone, nearly knocking it off the bed as I scrambled to get up. I moved to the window, my hands shaking as I pulled the blinds aside just enough to see. But there was nothing. The porch was empty. The figure was gone. Confused, I blinked rapidly, wondering if I had imagined it. Maybe the reflection was just a trick of the rainwater on the glass. My pulse thudded in my throat as I backed away from the window, the weight of the silence pressing on me once more. But then the knock came again. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk, only this time, it was inside the house. I spun around, my eyes wild as I scanned the hallway. The sound wasn't coming from the door anymore. It was coming from deeper within the house. The kitchen. The living room. The walls seemed to groan, shifting as if something was moving behind them. There was no way. I had locked the doors. I had checked every window. This wasn't happening. The knocks came again, one after the other. They sounded like they were right behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing. The room was empty, still, save for my own panicked breath. I could hear the knocking in my ears now, as if it had crawled under my skin. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. It was close, so close I could almost feel it, like a whisper against my neck. I backed into the corner of the room, my body shaking uncontrollably. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced down, barely able to focus. The front door camera. I opened it. The feed showed the porch again. The empty porch. But there, just in the corner of the screen, was something else. A shadow, looming in the doorway. It flickered in and out of view, like a distorted reflection, but I couldn't look away. The shadow grew longer, stretching out as if it were reaching for me, and I felt the temperature in the room drop. My breath was visible now, clouding in the cold air. And then the whisper came. "Let me in." The words were barely audible, but I heard them clearly. Cold, raspy, and close. They vibrated in my skull, and my chest tightened as I realized the voice wasn't outside. It was behind me. I whirled around, but there was no one there. My feet shuffled backward, my body frozen in terror, the lamp in my hand trembling like a fragile twig. I could hear the creaking of the floorboards behind me, the knocking, so close now I felt it in my bones. The air was thick. Too thick. It felt like it was closing in, suffocating me. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. I moved toward the hallway, my legs moving as if through water, slow and heavy. The knocking followed. It echoed inside my skull. It was everywhere. I turned the corner to the living room, but still, nothing. It wasn't outside anymore. It was in the house. It was in the walls. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost in my ear. "Let me in." I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if I was awake anymore. Everything felt warped, like time itself was bending. The knocking didn't stop. It never stopped. I stumbled backward, my feet catching on the edge of the carpet, and then... Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. The front door was open. The reflection was no longer on the screen. I heard the door creak open from the other side of the house. And then the whisper. "I'm inside now." And for the first time since moving into this quiet, empty house, I realized, this house wasn't empty anymore. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. My vision blurred, panic taking over every thought in my mind. The whisper echoed in my ears, a maddening sound that burrowed deep into my skull. It was in the walls. In the house. It was here. And then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway behind me. Each step was heavy, like something dragging its feet, drawing closer with every agonizing moment. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze, unable to move, unable to scream. I didn't even know if I was still breathing. I turned back to the front door. It stood ajar, a faint breeze swirling in, making the curtains flutter like pale ghosts. The threshold was empty now, the figure I had seen before gone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, that it was already inside, waiting for the moment to strike. I dared to take a step toward the door, my body moving on instinct, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the frame. The cold air brushed against my skin, but it didn't feel like fresh air, it felt wrong. I wanted to bolt, to run, to get as far from this place as possible, but I couldn't. Something kept me rooted there, like an invisible hand pressing me down. And then the knock came again. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. But it wasn't at the door anymore. It was coming from behind me. I spun around just in time to see something move in the corner of my vision, something tall and shadowed, stretching impossibly long as it drifted toward me. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came. My throat was too dry, too tight. My legs refused to move. The figure stepped into the light, its face hidden in the folds of darkness, but I could feel its eyes. Its presence, suffocating and cold, crawled over my skin. It was real. It was here. And it had been waiting for me. The knock came once more. Knock. Knock, asterisk asterisk. But this time, it wasn't a sound. It was a breath. A voice that whispered into the quiet, chilling the very marrow of my bones. Let me in. I felt the grip on my throat tighten as the world went black. And in that darkness, I realized, I had let it in. The night was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that stretches on until you're convinced the world has stopped moving, holding its breath. I'd just finished my late shift and walked through the door of my apartment, tired but grateful for the comfort of my own space. The dim glow of the city lights outside filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. I tossed my keys on the kitchen counter and kicked off my shoes. Alone again, like always. I sank into bed, the soft comfort of the sheets a welcome relief after hours of staring at a screen. As my body relaxed, my eyelids grew heavy, and before long, I drifted off into sleep. But sleep didn't come alone that night. Something else followed me into the darkness. It started with a buzz, a faint vibration against my bedside table. Groggily, I reached for my phone. The screen lit up, and I squinted, my mind struggling to process the notification. My thumb hovered over the screen as I saw the message that made my blood run cold. From my own number. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed. The caption, asterisk, don't wake up. Asterisk. I froze. My heart thudded in my chest, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. I held my breath, trying to make sense of it. Who could have taken this picture? I was alone in my apartment. I hadn't heard anyone come in. The last thing I remembered was falling asleep, the weight of exhaustion pulling me under. A soft, eerie shiver crawled up my spine, and for a moment, I wondered if I was still dreaming. But no, this was real. My phone was real. The picture was real. I glanced around my dark bedroom. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the other room, the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the wall. I was alone. Wasn't I? I tapped the screen, and the photo zoomed in. My body, lying motionless in bed, looked serene, almost too serene. But there was something unsettling about it, the angle, the way the light caught my face. It felt as though the image had been taken with a deliberate intention, a disturbing awareness of my stillness. My thumb shook as I typed a reply, but before I could hit send, another text appeared. Asterisk, don't make a sound. Asterisk. The message was simple, chilling. My breath caught in my throat as I felt the weight of those words settle in my chest. What was happening? How could this even be possible? My phone buzzed again, this time with another message from my number. Asterisk, don't look around. Asterisk. I froze. I hadn't moved. I hadn't looked away from the screen since the first photo. My pulse quickened, and I realized with a sickening jolt that I wasn't alone anymore. The quiet wasn't empty. There was something, or someone, in the apartment with me. I glanced at the door to my bedroom, half expecting to see someone standing there, watching me. But the doorway remained dark. Empty. The shadows clung to the edges, stretching like they were alive, but no one was there. I turned back to my phone, my fingers trembling as I swiped through the messages. The next photo sent a jolt through my chest. It was another picture of me, still asleep, but this one was different. It was taken from much closer, just a few feet away, and it felt wrong. My face was too still, my mouth slightly open, the subtle rise and fall of my chest unnervingly absent. My skin prickled. I didn't remember hearing any footsteps, any movement. My eyes darted around the room, panic creeping up my spine. The silence seemed to grow thicker, pressing in from all sides. I jumped when I heard a soft creak, the sound of something heavy shifting. My head snapped toward the doorway again. The shape in the dark corner of my room shifted just slightly, barely perceptible. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel it. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't alone. Suddenly, another message popped up, this one accompanied by a new picture. My eyes widened as I stared at it. It was a photo of my own face, wide-eyed and frozen in a silent scream. The pupils were dilated, the expression twisted in terror, as if captured in the midst of some horrible nightmare. It looked like me, but not like me. The eyes were wrong. The way they stared at the camera was wrong. It was as though the photo had been taken from a moment I couldn't remember. My hands were shaking violently now. I dropped the phone, but it buzzed again, the message flickering on the screen as it faced upward. Asterisk, I'm right behind you. Asterisk. A cold rush of air swept through the room, carrying with it the scent of something stale, something dead. My skin crawled as the realization hit me like a hammer. I hadn't been hearing things. There was something here, standing just behind me. I could feel it, pressing against me, like a shadow that had taken form. Slowly, cautiously, I turned my head, my body frozen in place, unwilling to move too quickly, too suddenly. The shape in the corner of the room loomed larger, more distinct. A figure, tall and dark, standing motionless. It had no face, just an empty void where its features should have been. Its presence was suffocating, like the air had turned thick and unbreathable. I could feel its eyes on me, even though it had none. I could feel its intent, its hunger. It wasn't just waiting, it was watching, it was calculating. I wanted to scream, but the words lodged in my throat. I could only manage a strangled gasp as my limbs trembled, refusing to move. The phone buzzed one last time. Asterisk, you should have stayed asleep. Asterisk. The words burned through me, and in that instant, I knew I was no longer in control of anything. The creature in the dark wasn't just waiting for me to wake up. It was waiting for me to realize that it was already too late. The room darkened, the shadows closing in around me like a tightening noose. I tried to scream, tried to move, but the darkness smothered me, pulling me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. And then, everything went black. It started quietly at first, just a faint, almost imperceptible sound. The kind of thing you might dismiss if you weren't listening carefully enough. I thought it was just the house settling, the creaks and groans of old floorboards. But when it continued night after night, I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was the ticking. At precisely 2 a.m., without fail, it would begin. A soft, rhythmic noise beneath the floorboards, like the winding of a clock, or perhaps, like a secret being hidden just below the surface. Every night, I would lie awake, my heart racing, wondering if tonight would be the night I finally figured out what was causing it. Each time, I would tell myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was wrong with this house. Something had been there long before I moved in. I had never believed in ghosts or things that go bump in the night. But as the ticking grew louder and more persistent, something inside me shifted. A fear I couldn't explain began to gnaw at me. There were moments I would lie still, listening to it, waiting for it to stop, and I couldn't help but feel it was somehow waiting for me to make a move. To discover what it was. I told myself it was just an old house, settling, a rodent chewing in the walls, or some forgotten mechanism left behind by a previous owner. But the fear grew with each passing night. I had tried everything. I checked the pipes, looked under the furniture, inspected the walls for any signs of rodents. Nothing. The ticking never stopped. It was too consistent, too deliberate to be some animal, I thought. It was as if something was counting down to an inevitable moment. A moment I couldn't quite grasp. A moment I feared would reveal something I wasn't prepared for. I considered calling an expert, but even that felt useless. The sound would stop the second anyone else was around. I would have to face it alone, whatever it was. And then there was the night it became unbearable. The ticking started as usual, sharp and precise, almost mechanical. But that night, it felt different. It was louder, more intense, like something was agitated. The air in the room felt thick, too heavy to breathe in. I lay in bed, stiff with fear, my eyes wide open, staring into the dark. The clock on the nightstand read 2 a.m. on the dot, and still the ticking persisted. It was as though it were coming from underneath my very bones. Every time the tick echoed, I felt my body react. A nervous shiver, a cold sweat. Why am I so afraid of this? I asked myself. It's just a noise. But it wasn't just a noise. The sound felt almost alive, as if it were watching me. That was the moment I realized I was no longer in control. I felt like a marionette, pulled by invisible strings, unable to escape. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was beneath the floorboards. With a trembling hand, I grabbed the crowbar from the closet, my pulse pounding in my ears. I could almost hear the ticking growing louder, as if it were urging me on, teasing me. The room seemed darker, suffocating. I approached the corner of the bedroom, where the sound was most pronounced. The floorboards there were slightly warped, old and worn down by time. Each movement felt like a betrayal of my body. My legs were weak, and my heart raced in my chest. But I forced myself forward. The crowbar sank into the crack between the boards with a satisfying creak. I pulled it up, the sound so loud, I was certain someone could hear it. But there was no one else. Just me and the growing sense that whatever was down there was waiting for me. As I peeled back the floorboards, a cold draft rushed up from the dark space below. The ticking grew louder. I could almost feel it in my skull, reverberating through my teeth. My hands shook uncontrollably, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I felt like I was being drawn into something bigger than me. What I found beneath the floorboards wasn't what I expected. A hidden room lay beneath, cramped and dark, the air thick with the smell of dust and rot. The floor was damp, a soft, musty scent rising from the space. My flashlight flickered as I shone it into the room, revealing the walls, which were covered in faint scratches. As I stepped down into the room, the ticking grew deafening. And then, there it was. A small wind-up doll sat in the center of the room, its body made of porcelain, chipped and cracked. Its wide, glassy eyes stared up at me, its expression frozen in an eerie smile. It was unnerving, but what made my blood run cold wasn't its appearance. It was moving. Its tiny, stiff arms twitched, and its head jerked as though it were trying to mimic my movements. My stomach turned, and I stepped back, but the doll's movements kept pace with mine. A twitch of my fingers, and it followed. A slight shift in my body, and it mirrored me exactly. This wasn't possible. My breath caught in my throat as I moved again, this time trying to test if it was some trick of the mind, some reflection. But every time I moved, the doll jerked in the exact same way. As if it were me. I couldn't tear my eyes away. My chest tightened with panic, and I stumbled backward, but the doll's gaze never left me. It was as though it was waiting for me to do something, to make the next move. That's when I heard it. A low whisper, so faint I almost didn't catch it. "You're not alone." I froze, the words slithering through my mind like a dark echo. The voice wasn't my own, but it was so familiar. I felt it in my bones, a vibration deep inside me. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air thick and suffocating. The doll jerked again, its head snapping to one side, as if it had been startled. The ticking grew louder, more frantic, the noise bouncing off the walls, so deafening I couldn't hear anything else. My hands trembled uncontrollably. The doll's eyes gleamed in the dim light, and I could swear it was grinning at me. "You're not alone." The voice came again, but now it was joined by a chorus of whispers, all around me. The walls were closing in. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and damp earth, the ticking still pounding in my skull. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my wrist, gripping tightly. I tried to pull away, but my body didn't obey. It was as if someone was pulling me toward the doll. My legs moved without my permission. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My fingers twitched, and as I turned to run, the doll mirrored me again. Only now, it was moving faster, jerking in an unnatural rhythm, as though the wind-up mechanism inside it was about to snap. And then, with a sickening crack, the room fell silent. The ticking stopped. The doll sat motionless. But the whispers lingered, rising in pitch and intensity. "You're me." My heart stopped. I looked down at my hands, which were trembling uncontrollably. My chest tightened, and I gasped for air. The words echoed in my head, growing louder. "You're me." Suddenly, I realized I wasn't standing alone. In the dim light, I saw a figure move in the corner of the room, a shadow that shifted like a reflection. And I knew, in that moment, that it was no longer just a doll. It was me. It was just another quiet night at home. The kind of night where you sink into your couch after a long day, flick on the TV, and let the world outside fade away. The silence of the house seemed comforting, like it always did when I was alone. No one to worry about, no one to answer to. It was just me. My thoughts, my space. I lived in a small house on the edge of town, surrounded by thick trees and distant fields. The kind of place where nothing out of the ordinary ever happened, or so I thought. Nothing ever disturbed the peace. Until that night. It started with a figure. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, maybe the wind playing tricks, or a shadow stretching across the driveway. But then, I saw it again. And it didn't feel like a trick. It felt like something was out there. I tried to shake it off, but the unease settled in like an itch I couldn't scratch. I glanced toward the window, thinking it was just a passing car or someone's headlights cutting through the darkness. But then I saw it more clearly. A man, standing motionless in my driveway, staring up at my house. My blood ran cold. There was something wrong about the way he stood, too still, too purposeful. His posture was rigid, unnatural, like a statue. He didn't seem to move at all, and he wasn't looking around. He was just staring. I felt a strange pull, an urge to look at him longer, but I fought it. My heart began to race as I reached for the remote and clicked on the porch light, hoping to reveal the figure and make sense of it. The light flickered to life, spilling its harsh glow into the driveway. That's when I saw him clearly. The figure was still standing there. But it wasn't just any stranger. It was me. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. The man outside had the same clothes as me, the same posture, the same frame. Even the same dark hair, slightly tousled, just like mine always was. But his eyes, those eyes, were not mine. They glowed. A sickly, unnatural yellow that pierced the darkness with an eerie intensity. I couldn't tear my gaze away. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a sharp, creeping terror rising within me. I stepped back, my legs feeling like lead, but I couldn't stop looking. It didn't move, not yet. But I could feel it, the tension, the anticipation. It wasn't just standing there anymore. It was waiting. This can't be real, I thought. This is a nightmare. I must be imagining it. It's just the darkness playing tricks on me, but my heart hammered in my chest, each beat louder than the last. I stumbled back toward the window and looked again. The figure hadn't moved an inch, but now I could see it more clearly. The expression on its face, my face, wasn't neutral or calm. It was a twisted, distorted version of myself. It wore a smile that didn't belong. A smile too wide, too sinister, like it had been stretched out unnaturally. I couldn't breathe. My pulse hammered in my ears. What did it want? Without thinking, I scrambled to grab my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to dial 911. But as I glanced back outside, my hand went cold. The figure had moved closer. A few steps. Slow and deliberate, like it was testing the air, savoring the moment. My chest tightened. The smile stretched wider. And then, it spoke. Let me in. Its voice was my own, but it wasn't. It was hollow, echoing, like it had been drained of all warmth and life. It sent a wave of nausea through me, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't know what to do. My phone slipped from my hand, forgotten, as I stared in horror at the figure in the driveway. It wasn't real, it couldn't be. But as I continued to look, the man who looked like me took another step forward. My heart skipped a beat. The figure outside was standing right at the foot of my porch now, only the glowing eyes visible through the window. It wasn't me. It couldn't be. It wasn't human. Something about it felt wrong, twisted. Let me in, it repeated, but this time, its voice was closer. Louder. More demanding. The door. I had to get inside. I turned, frantic, and tried the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. My hands were shaking too much. I yanked harder, desperate to get away, to lock myself in. I heard a soft creak behind me. My heart stopped. I spun around, and there it was again. Another version of me. Standing in the hallway, just a few feet from the door. My face, grinned at me, that same twisted, malicious smile. Its eyes burned with the same sickly glow. I stumbled back, the air thick with panic. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely a breath. The thing, took a slow, deliberate step forward. "I'm you," it said, its voice colder than the air around me. "I'm everything you've been hiding from." I recoiled, pressing myself against the wall. The other version of me stepped closer, its eyes never leaving mine. The man outside, the one in the driveway, hadn't stopped moving either. His eyes glowed through the glass, relentless, like a predator's. He didn't blink, didn't move, just watched me. Then, in a blur, I realized, it was here. It was me. It had always been me. And it wasn't leaving. "Let me in," it whispered again, and I could feel its breath on my skin. I screamed. I tried to turn and run, but the door behind me swung open with a violent force. I didn't have time to react. The version of me stepped into the room, its smile stretched even wider, now grotesque, the yellow eyes glaring at me. "You let me in," it hissed, the words dripping with malice. "Now there's nowhere to hide." I reached for the door, but I was too slow. The darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke, everything was wrong. The house was eerily silent again, but it wasn't the same. I could feel it in the air, thick and oppressive. I turned slowly, trying to understand what had happened. But then, my phone buzzed. A new message appeared on the screen, as though typed by invisible hands. "You let me in." I froze. My reflection in the window caught my eye, but it wasn't mine. It was his. My own eyes glowed yellow in the dark. I had never been alone. Not since that night. Not since the moment I opened the door.